Hi, I'm Roy from Roy's Garage. Today I'm going to be working on a 2013 Toyota Corolla 1.8 liter automatic. I'm going to be showing you how to service the transmission with this transmission fluid exchanger. In addition to this trans fluid exchanger, these are the tools that I'm going to be using to do this job. 1/4-inch ratchet, 1/4-inch extension, 10mm socket, door panel remover, and these are for the trans fluid exchanger machine. Flat tip screwdriver, 10mm socket, 3/8 impact wrench, and 2 cans of brake clean. So these are the parts that I'm going to be using today to do this job. This is a transmission filter kit made by ATP. The reason why I use this particular brand is this material is made out of some kind of felt. So when the transmission fluid touches it, it expands a little. So if your pan is not perfectly straight, it kind of takes up a little bit of the warpness. And this is the filter that we're going to be using today that came in this kit. And I'm going to be using a full synthetic transmission fluid. Okay, so I'm going to be removing this pan. We're underneath the car. This is the driver's side. There's a whole bunch of bolts that we're going to have to remove in order to drop the pan. I'm gonna be splitting it open. Just gotta be careful. Okay, so I'm going to be removing this filter. There's 3 bolts, one here, and one here. So I'm going to be putting on the new filter. So this filter comes with an O-ring, a new O-ring, so you need to put this O-ring around the filter first. So make sure the old O-ring is not in here in the trans. If it is, you got to take it out. So anyway, once I got my O-ring on, now I'm going to put the filter on. Okay, so now we're going to be cleaning the pan. Okay, so we're going to be removing this old gasket. You just got to rip it apart. Okay, so now we're going to be cleaning out the pan with some brake clean. So there's these magnets on the bottom of the pan. You got to clean these guys. Okay, so I wiped down the cover. So if there's any excess gasket material, you can use a razor blade or putty knife or whatever you want to use to scrape this excess gasket off. This one came out pretty easy. Some of them you really gotta, you know, scrape them, but this one is pretty good. If it's really hard to come off, then what you might have to do is use a machine with a wire wheel to clean it up. But in this case, we just need a razor blade because most of it came out. Okay, so before we put the pan on, what I'm going to do is, you see these bolt holes right here, all these bolt holes. I'm going to get a hammer and I'm going to pound this this area slightly lower, very slightly lower than the pan. The reason is, right now this is the high point, because when they bolted it up, yeah, it stretches the metal, so this is going to be the high point. So if you don't pound it down when you put the new gasket on, the high point is what's going to cut the gasket, and then you're going to spring one leak. So what I'm going to be doing with my hammer, I'm just going to be pounding all these down, just a very little. Okay, on this type of a gasket, because it's a felt gasket, you do not put any sealers on this gasket. You want to put it on dry. If you put a sealer on, you defeat the purpose of this type of a gasket, yeah, because this gasket will swell once the thing hits the transmission fluid. So if you put any kind of sealer, it cannot swell up. So you don't put any sealers on. Where these tabs are, the hookers are a little bit smaller. So what you do is you get one bolt and just put it through, and that's what's going to hold the gasket in place. Okay, so before we bolt the pan, we're going to check the transmission side, make sure there's no gasket material on the transmission side, and we're going to be wiping the transmission side, wiping all that oil off before we put the pan on. Okay, so I'm going to be wiping down the transmission side, getting all that oil off, make sure there's no gasket material on. So now I'm going to be putting on the pan. Okay, so now remove this guy. So right now I'm going to snug it up with my impact wrench. Okay, before I forget, this oil pan does have a drain plug, but I usually don't open up this plug to drain the trans fluid. The reason is, even if you get one new gasket, sometimes when you tighten this thing back up, sometimes it leaks. So as much as possible, try not to remove this plug. Just drop the whole pan, and that way you don't have to worry about this plug leaking later on. So now we're on the passenger side. I gotta remove this plastic shield to get access to the transmission cooler lines. Okay, and there's gonna be a couple more bolts underneath. Okay, we're gonna be removing this plastic piece. So now we can get access to the transmission cooler line. So now, before we do anything else, I'm going to be adding 4 quarts of transmission fluid right into this dipstick tube. I'm going to set up this machine for 4 quarts. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to check the level of the fluid. Oh, it looked pretty good. Okay, so I'm gonna be removing one side of the transmission cooler line. You can remove either side, it doesn't matter, but whatever side is easier for you. So now I'm gonna be hooking up my adapters to the trans cooler lines. So now I'm going to be hooking this up to the adapters on the trans cooler lines. Okay, so we're going to be hooking up the transmission cooler line. Okay, so I programmed this machine to flush the transmission with 9 more quarts. So 9 plus 4 is 13. So I'm going to push the enter button. I'm going to start up the engine. Okay, so I'm going hitting the enter button. Now this machine is automatically going to be flushing out the transmission. So what's happening is it's adding and subtracting. You know, adding maybe half a quart, subtracting half a quart. It's going to keep doing that until 9 quarts go through the system. It's going to take about 10 minutes. So what's happening now is this is the dirty fluid that's getting sucked in, and now this is the clean fluid that it's adding. Okay, so we flushed it out with 9 quarts, so now we're going to be removing this. So I'm going to be removing these adapters, and I'm going to be connecting the trans cooler line to the radiator. Okay, so I'm gonna have to put on this plastic shield. Some of these retainers are broken, so I got some other retainers that I can put on. Securing this plastic shield with these plastic retainers. The old ones that I took off was all broken, so putting on some new ones. Before we lower the car, I want to make sure that there is no leaks around the dam gasket. Now is the time to go look. Everything looks really dry. So now I'm going to be checking the transmission level, but first we gotta start the engine. The thing gotta be running in park when you check the level. Okay, the engine is running. Now we're gonna check the level of the transmission. Okay, right now it's very good. So what I need to do now is I gotta drive this car. I gotta let this transmission heat up, maybe about 3 miles, 4 miles or so. Come back, recheck the transmission fluid, and if it needs topping off, I'll just top them off and we'll be good to go. Okay, I road tested the vehicle. I checked the fluid level, topped it off, everything looked good. If you like my video, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, tell all your friends and family, and I see you in the next video. Aloha.